Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
I think I have a couple of other videos and news that I want to do on that. That's cool. Plus, I'm sure there'll be a bunch of other found footage videos by that.
Y'all ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Geeky Gentlemen. This is a special episode, and I know I say that all the time, but let me tell you why this is a special episode. This is the very first episode of Geeky Gentlemen that will be recorded in my new apartment, and I'm pretty happy about that. And I'm kind of having this weird feeling of this is what it's going to be like from now on, because I'm sitting at what was my father's desk that he left me before he passed, and it's for those that know what I'm going to say here, it's an old sheriff style roll top desk.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really big, and it's not exactly made for computers, but I'm making it work. And I'm just really excited to have this thing, because it's been sitting in a storage facility for about a year and some change now, so it's kind of cool to have it back together. I'm pretty happy right now.
Oh, that is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so everyone, anyway, welcome to this week's episode of Geeky Gentlemen. Milan was supposed to be here, but today is his birthday, and I'm pretty sure he's just blazed out of his mind and forgot all about us. So we'll forgive him.
It is his birthday. If he ever gets an excuse, it's today.
I suppose so. But anyway, Steve and I will try to bullshit through this topic together, you know.
Well, hopefully not bullshit, but we will try to.
But isn't that like a fundamental part of the topic?
No, not necessarily, but I guess we'll get into that.
Anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. Steve, what are we talking about this week?
Okay, well, unless I walked into a time loop and I'm mistaken, I believe that we are talking about pop culture, geek culture, superheroes in academia. In essence, you go to a school and you can study Batman, or you can study the Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That whole experience of making media and pop culture in general a learning experience, and how you translate from one to the other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's slightly, I guess, different than what I had in mind when you said it. But
okay, what did you have in mind?
The two are almost like intrinsically connected, I think.
Okay.
When you said comic books in academia or pop culture in academia, I was thinking you meant more how academia seems to view pop culture and comic books and all that kind of stuff. Because there is that, even today, even though when there are, like you said, classes on this shit, there is still this general mood of just looking down on it, I feel. And I think that it's a very interesting topic, and we'll definitely both be covering both sides of this.
Well, that's going to be interesting to address, because I pretty generally disagree. I mean, I've had a lot of classes now just on pop culture. Like I had an entire class on the Nolan trilogy and religious studies, no less. And it was a class that people envied. There was a Breaking Bad class the semester before that, and people are still upset over the fact that they won't bring out a second one now that the show's over.
Well, like, I don't know if it's certainly not every class. There are certainly parts of academia that have embraced it, and I guess what's interesting about this, and what got, I guess, this interpretation of it in my mind, is the day before you said that, I was listening to Fresh Air, which is an NPR show. Terry Gross is the main host of it. And I like that show for the interviews that they have with people, like, actually important people. But I find that everyone on that show has the absolute worst taste in media and just, like, books, music, movies, all that. They just have awful taste. And a lot of them are, like, I think it's David Bianculli teaches television history or something like that. And he's just such a fucking snob.
Interesting, okay.
Just prudes, just a lot of them. They have the most interesting people come on for, like, interviews, but God, they just all have horrible taste. But, like, what the particular thing that got this in mind for me is I'm pretty sure it was Fresh Air. There's a woman doing a book review, or maybe it was a movie review, and she was talking about how there's time travel involved, and she's talking about, like, all the complexities of it, and then she goes, but I'm going to stop because I sound like a Doctor Who obsessed fangirl, and this is so much smarter than that.
Ooh.
And that just hit me the wrong way, because I'm like, no, this is exactly as smart as Doctor Who. Doctor Who proves that you can be smart and mainstream at the same time. So I don't know, that's kind of where I'm coming from with that viewpoint of, like, that looking down kind of snobbish style that like the academic or the intellectual community has towards some of this stuff sometimes.
Okay, well I'm gonna draw a conclusion here, and it's from the assumed premise that the people that you're talking about are generally older.
Yeah,
and I think that can be concluded if we're talking about an older base. But it seems to me that the younger we go, particularly college age, to maybe even like 30s, people are far more open to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, when we go back and talk about, like, John F. Kennedy, and one of his favorite books is the James Bond series. And when people get older, and particularly presidents, they seem to lose that kind of taste, like you're mentioning. But then right now you go to any college campus and you say, hey, would you want a Batman and philosophy course? I guarantee you, like, 3 out of 4 people would say yes.
Oh, hell yeah, and as long as they don't teach it with the Batman and philosophy book.
Yeah, as long as they don't teach it with that, provided, yeah.
Yeah, that thing's kind of awful.
It's not awful, but it certainly has a lot of awful essays.
It just misses... They get too many analytic philosophers that miss the point of all the really interesting questions.
I hate that Robin chapter with all of my fiber of my being, but...
Yeah, anyway, we should do a review of that, which would be the weirdest thing ever.
You should do that. I need to go back and reread it, because there is a couple of essays in there that I like, but...
Yeah, but, like, I guess I can definitely sympathize with you there. And, I mean, you're talking to a guy who... I'd say at least 75, if not more, % of my college papers that I get to choose what I want to write about are all on, pop culture, geeky things, comic books, superheroes, something like that.
Oh yeah, same here. For the last 3 or 4 semesters, every one of my final papers have been on Batman.
Yeah, I did that for a couple of years. Recently, I had a summer class where I did a paper on the new 52 Wonder Woman book. Then, before that, I had a sociology class where I did it on an issue of Transmetropolitan.
Oh, cool.
Before that, I had a ancient philosophy course that I... modern philosophy course that I did paper contrasting... Kant, or maybe it was Hume, and H.P. Lovecraft. So yeah, there's just a lot of things. Oh yeah, it was Hume, because I was...
Yeah, because I was thinking, I don't know how Kant would fit into that. Really.
Yeah, it was definitely Hume, because I was playing around with the shades of blue thing and the colors out of space.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, that's just the last year of stuff I've done, with superheroes and stuff, and for my final project and the very first 3D modeling course I took, I modeled the inside of the TARDIS, but I made like my own custom design and everything.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that I think the appeal of writing your papers on stuff that's in like pop culture and superheroes in particular is that it immediately is interesting. Because when you hear someone say, I'm writing a paper on Hume and H.P. Lovecraft, you want to go, how in the hell are those two connected? And then when you see that they are, and that there are actually really good arguments for how they're connected, it just makes both of them instantly more fascinating.
Well, it's also true, in a lot of respects, that pop culture is extremely adaptable. No matter what it's about, it's very easy to structure it in some way to fit an academic idea. Like, if you just look at the 75 years of Batman, you can write an essay on anything imaginable, presumably. Like, the essay I'm working on right now that's about to be published is analyzing Batman's no-kill rule with the rules of deontology. And and I made this point early on in it that said that I'm going from a very specific perspective by what's in canon, and it's just as easy to write a paper about the opposite and why Batman should kill and why he did kill. Because it's such an open area. And I think part of why pop culture and academia blend so much in recent years is simply because it's a lot easier to structure your own views and arguments when you have something as malleable as a superhero or pop culture.
Yeah, and I think, speaking in philosophy in particular, let me ask, you ever read anything of Sartre's?
Yeah.
I'm assuming existentialism is a humanism then.
I'm sure you're talking about the whole existence precedes essence kind of thing.
Yeah. It's the famous paper. Well, like, here's the thing about that, and Sartre does a lot of this in his writings. He puts a lot of references to things that I'm pretty sure only a handful of people had ever heard of. Like, the closest he got to, I guess, a pop culture reference for his era was a reference to Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so, like, I think philosophy is, in particular, is strengthened by pop culture references, because, like I was saying earlier, you already know it. You know, you already know Batman to a certain extent. And the less specific you get with Batman is to talk about Batman as a character as opposed to talk about Batman as a character in canon and Batman as a character in this one story. Like, the more general you get about it, the more easily accessible it is, so it makes the ideas that you're trying to talk about easier to understand, and it makes it elevates the subject matter that you're talking about beyond, just silly kid stuff, I think, if you can connect those two really well.
That's interesting, because I remember when I was first learning about Sartre in my intro to philosophy course, I told the professor that Sartre seems to talk quite a bit like Joss Whedon, and I was quoting Angel to him, and the ideas lined up pretty well, and I think there is a paper there. I mean,
Joss Whedon does a lot of existentialism and that stuff, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But also, like, if you want to just talk about philosophers who make references, look no further than Plato. And part of the reason why some people find it harder to understand now is because they don't understand the book and poetry references he's making. Mm-hmm. But he's very obviously making them all over the place, especially in character names and such. Even when you go, like, down to Parmenides and his whole epic poetry kind of philosophy, it's really just a giant reference to the Odyssey.
The Odyssey, have you read the Iliad and Odyssey?
Yes, but it's been like 5 years.
I don't think they're very good.
Well, I mean, you have to put it into context, right? About being in ancient Greece and all that.
No, fuck your context. It's just, it's kind of bad. Like, there's a scene in Iliad where Hera comes up to Zeus, and Zeus is basically like, "Oh my god, babe, you're so hot. I want to fuck you right now." And she's like, "What?" And he goes, "You're so much hotter than..." And then Zeus lists off every single woman that he's had sex with behind Hera's back.
But I think that just speaks to the characterization of Greek gods in general.
Well, no. As an attempt to convey to her just how attractive he finds her in this one moment. So, I don't know. Something about that. Like, it's just missing a really bad joke of her going, "Wait, I didn't know about her." And Zeus going, "Oh, lightning bolts."
Okay, I see where you're going from that. It might just be that the Iliad and Odyssey are just... They're important works before they are critically interesting or good works.
Yeah, I guess I'd agree with that. But anyway, back to the subject.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to talk about good and bad when you're talking about historical fiction anyway.
Yeah, but no, what I was getting to, with, like, Sartre in particular, but, yeah, I guess Plato did a lot, too, and I know a lot of, because of Plato and other philosophers and writers at the time, we know that plays existed, but we don't know what they are about. Like, they reference plays, say, "Oh, in this play, blah, blah, blah happened." But that's the only thing we know about that play.
Yeah.
And, like, that's the only reason we know it exists is because, you know, Plato makes a passing reference to it or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of extrapolations there anyway, because we only know certain philosophers exist because other people wrote about them. Socrates, for example. Like, I don't think there's any definitive proof that guy was real, aside from Plato always using him as a character.
I don't know, maybe Aristotle and...
Well, Aristotle was a student of Plato, and we already had a record of him by that point, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Plus the whole he was Alexander the Great's teacher kind of thing.
Yeah, and then there's, like, Diogenes mentions Socrates in passing.
Does he? Or does he just or does he just mean like a conversation of Plato's?
No, there's this great scene, there's this great little bit of Diogenes. And for everyone that doesn't know, Diogenes is my favorite ancient philosopher because he was basically a crazy homeless person. So, like, someone asks Plato what he thinks of Diogenes. Or, no, hold on, let me back up. So, someone asks Diogenes what he thinks of Socrates, and Diogenes says, "A madman." And then someone asks Plato what he thinks of Diogenes, and Plato says, "Like Socrates, but mad." Diogenes was said to criticize Plato for being long-winded.
Which he is.
Yeah. Just one of those funny little things. I love Diogenes stories so much.
Well, I guess to get back to the subject and maybe expand a little bit past just simple philosophy, well, not simple, but just philosophy in general, political science. When we talk about really important movies, we talk about the ones that make political statements. We talk about The Conversation, we talk about Chinatown, we talk about Maltese Falcon, we talk about 3 Days of the Condor, and even now I would talk about Captain America the Winter Soldier because it was so politically brilliant.
Oh, come on. How are you not going to throw a Doctor Strangelove in there?
Oh, yeah, Doctor Strangelove. Doctor Strangelove should definitely be there. 2001: A Space Odyssey should definitely be there as far as talking about political systems in that regard. But for the sheer fact that pop culture references academia in itself, it makes it a little bit easier for academia to reference it back.
Yeah, I think, like I think there's definitely a limit there. I mean, you're not gonna... I'm sure somebody will... this is why I hate universals. But I'm gonna say it as universal anyway.
Okay.
No one is ever going to write a paper in which they attempt to make Transformers 2 Revenge of the Fallen seem like an intelligent piece of cinematic work.
Well, someone has. Now it's that. And they've said it's an important piece of cinematic work or intellectual piece of cinematic work in Michael Bay's cinematography.
No, I'm talking about, like, socially or politically.
Oh, okay,
or
yeah, socially and politically, no. There's no way you can make that argument.
Yeah, like, I'm sure that someone will try, but no one's ever going to make a good effort at, like, making an academic paper about fucking Transformers 2 and its themes and its, like, commentary on the world. No, they're fucking swinging wrecking balls underneath a goddamn Decepticon.
And evidently the American military is just everywhere in no one else's existence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would make sense if we were in China, but... Not China, but in Japan, but...
Anyway, so, like... No, but there is a limit, though. I mean, you're not going to be able to talk academically or intelligently about every single thing, despite this show attempting to. Hence why we have an episode about fucking My Little Pony.
Well, I mean, we always talk about in fair reviewing and critiquing of taking the thing at its own merits. Like you joke about me watching Power Rangers, and I'm never going to pretend that Power Rangers is the greatest thing ever. But you certainly can't take it in any term aside from its own. And if you can sympathize with it on that regard, that it is this simple, then I think the potential for academia is there.
Okay.
Because I'm sure there's a good paper there in Japanese versus American perception of justice simply by comparing Super Sentai to Power Rangers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know what you just said, but okay.
Super Sentai is the thing that they take the fight scenes from in Power Rangers.
Okay. I guess, I don't know, like, Power Rangers does seem to be on that line for me, where I suppose if you really try...
No, I don't think you have to really try. I think you just need to look at it.
Okay. I dread the day when Steve picks, like, the fucking Power Rangers movie.
Oh, I hate the Power Rangers movie.
For us to review.
We'll review a series before we review the movie.
Oh, goddamn.
Yeah. Well, now, thank you for giving me the idea, though.
Oh, fuck. It'll be a fun title card, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, like... See, I think I guess Power Rangers kind of serves as to show that I'm a bit of a hypocrite here. Because I sort out this thing where I'm like, oh, these people are just snobs. They don't want to, like, you know, just accept that this thing proves it can be good. But then I guess I'm kind of dismissive of Power Rangers because it's Power Rangers. Now, in my defense, I just thought Power Rangers was pretty awful for teaching kids that you can, you know, hit somebody with a sword and they'll just have sparks fly off and fall down. But beyond that, I haven't watched it, and I'm not going to be too judgmental about Power Rangers. You have to give me a little bit of rope here and admit that you do sound a little silly trying to talk intelligently about Power Rangers.
Yeah, but I only sound silly to the people that don't watch Power Rangers.
Okay. And that's certainly fair.
Yeah, and I mean the whole point about going into a class studying something pop culture related is that you're under the assumption that everyone who volunteered for this class has seen it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm certainly not saying you should go to some university and go to the dean and say, hey, I want a class on Power Rangers, especially if it's like an 80-year-old, really conservative Southern dean that thinks, what, Power Rangers, really? But at the same time, the argument can be made. It's just a matter of finding someone who will listen, and that's not as hard as it used to be.
Yeah, I suppose so. See, this is where we get into really interesting areas, in that, where's the line? Because, like, this is going to sound like a slippery slope, but if you can watch something like Power Rangers and attempt to teach a class on it and get at the intellectual areas of it, at what point are you giving the thing more credit than it deserves? Like, at what point are you giving the pop culture related thing more credit than it was intended to have? And here we get to Death of the Author, but still, it's worth talking about.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Because one of the things I hated about my Nolan Trilogy Batman class is that we gave that whole franchise far too much credit in certain regards. I don't think, no matter how much you preach it to me, that there is a religious studies game theory explanation for why Batman was riding around on rooftops and flipping over cop cars in Batman Begins. and I dread the day that I have to go back to that class and listen to someone honestly try to say that was intelligent. Because it wasn't.
It's just a cool action scene.
Is.
I don't know why people have to have, like, this deep justification for it.
It is. It is a cool action scene, and it's fun to watch, and the whole thing where he blacks the car out and hides in the darkness is awesome. But you can't...
It makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but it's awesome. At the same time, there is no religious studies answer for it. You shouldn't even bother to ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my big problem with that class, is that they kept giving those films far too much credit in certain regards. The whole assumption behind religious studies topics in general are that for the religious man, these ideas of sacredism and totemism and game theory and stuff like that apply. They forget that the Batman films are not an allegory of religion, maybe of symbolism, maybe of philosophy, maybe of politics and government, but religion isn't a thing there that you can just inject any which way.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was a religion class, because you talked about the class before, but you never mentioned that it's religion studies, which, I mean, I can still see it. It's Batman. You can get anywhere with Batman, and Grant Morrison's proved it. But with the Nolan films in particular, religion is like one of the farthest things from that franchise to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard Alex always talk about how he can use Buddhism virtues in the Nolan trilogy, and I can sympathize with that. At the same time, there's a line drawn between finding parallels and then, in the case of the class that I took, forcing those parallels. And
Gotcha.
ignoring the counter-arguments simply because they don't mesh with that idea.
Yeah.
And that's where we will run into the dangers of academia, which is someone wants to make a class for something because they want other people to like it and make it smarter than it is, not because they feel like there's something truly to be gained from it.
And I think there is something to be gained from studying the Nolan films. I just don't know if, like, through the religious lens is the right way to go for it.
Or at least if you're going to do the religious lens, have some perspective on what you can and can't say.
I mean, like, seriously, the fucking... Let the action scenes be action scenes.
Yeah.
One of the things that's great about the Nolan franchise is that they're really intelligent movies that have a lot going on in them, but they're also fun to watch. Just on their own as, you know, action blockbuster movies. And so you should let it be an action blockbuster movie when it's trying to be that. Like, I don't imagine that you can really tell me anything metaphorically intriguing about the fucking skydiving scene in Hong Kong in Dark Knight. It's just a cool-ass scene. That's all I need it to be.
I mean, you certainly can about the why and the motivation and stuff, but not of the scene itself. Like, yeah. Batman jumping is not an act of symbolism.
Well, I mean...
Well, in that very specific scene, I mean. Like, him jumping and placing bombs is not an act of symbolism. The reason why he does it and what it leads to is.
Yeah.
But not in the sense that the action that's there just to be action is important or symbolic.
Exactly. Okay. So where do we go from here?
I think maybe the next way to go from here, because this is a really strange topic, because it's really big and really narrow at the same time.
I know, like, I'm afraid we're done.
I don't think, because we didn't bring up any of the interesting stuff, I don't think, but then I can't think of what the interesting stuff is.
It's your topic, you have the reins, go.
Okay, sort of what I want to go from here is, because we addressed some of the translation issues in forcing something into academia, and we addressed some of the whether or not people look down on it or not. I think what could be interesting to look at here is when you have a class, like say it's just a class on political philosophy. And, you know, in a political philosophy class, they'll make you read the Leviathan, they'll make you read the Republic, just important texts.
Can I just cut in real quick?
Sure.
The Leviathan is like the coolest name you could ever give to anything. And it's like the most disappointing text ever. It's so long-winded and, goddamn it, David Hume. Okay.
Not Hume, Hobbes.
Oh, my bad. Yeah.
No, but Hume was also long-winded and boring at points, but...
Yeah, but he had the whole badass atheist in that time period thing going for him.
Yeah, and I always loved his whole philosophy of, after you're done pondering, just go out and drink and forget about it. I love that. Anyway, kind of where I wanted to go with this is using, not as the focus of the class, but as a teaching tool, pop culture. Like, say you're in a class about political philosophy, and they get to this point about defining justice. Huh?
Can I cut in with, like, a much more direct and significantly more hilarious example?
Sure.
Okay. I cannot remember this guy's name, but he was a science teacher. Or a professor, whatever. And he was talking about teaching to, like, a class full of teachers, basically.
Right.
And he goes, see, the one thing that you always hear from students is, when am I ever going to use any of this physics and math and blah, blah, blah. And the one time I never hear any of those questions is when I use superheroes as my examples. Because what he does is he'll take, like, alright, say the Flash is doing this thing and he's trying to block a bullet. And you gotta determine how fast the Flash has to run in order to catch the bullet and not be harmed. And it's like, oh my god, that's so true, because it's not, you're never gonna use that in your real life. Of course you're not. It's the fucking Flash. He doesn't exist. He's a superhero. But he used, you know, pop culture in academia to actually get the point across and, like, circumvent a certain bias that students have.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. That's perfect. Like, how much better is it to learn writing in a writing course when you don't have to sit there and talk about theories and forms, and they say, go read Stephen King books, and then we'll talk about them.
Yeah.
Or go watch Winter Soldier, and we'll talk about soldiers in American history.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's just an inherent engagement that you can derive from that. And it doesn't have to be a class that just focuses on pop culture. It can be a class on any topic, because media is so diverse that it can fit any topic.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can take, and this is the problem I guess I have in a lot of my classes, is my brain just goes a mile a minute, and, you know, you see me do this on the show, I just fucking did it. Where something that seems totally unrelated will pop into my mind, and it'll be perfectly relevant to whatever we're just talking about. At least tangentially, if nothing else.
Right.
And that's how I am in class. I hate, despise with the burning passion of 1,000 suns that teaching technique, which really isn't a technique, of asking a question and being really quiet and not moving on at all until someone at least tries to answer the question. I hate it when professors do that.
Me too.
Mostly because it just makes the class get really quiet for like 5 minutes, and frankly, if I'm paying, you know, $1,000 to be in this class, I want to get moving. I don't want to sit there and be quiet time. So I'll just whatever it is in my head, I'll just throw it out there. Even if it's just silly and not really related. If I think it makes a good point, I'll throw it out there. Professor was talking about how women were viewed, like if you had a baby girl and you didn't already have a son, you probably would just leave the kid out to the elements because just girls weren't worth anything back in this time period. And I go, you ever seen the movie The Dictator, Sacha Baron Cohen? And he goes, no. There's this great scene where he delivers a baby, and he goes, "Oh, it's this girl. Where's trash can?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know if I'd call that a great scene, but yeah, it certainly demonstrates the kind of attitude that we're talking about here."
Yeah, I remember in a history class we were talking about, like, 1800s Civil War, and how the officers were more gentlemanly and didn't get involved in battle. And immediately what comes to mind is that Monty Python scene, where all the guys are fighting, and the generals are just walking around over their dead bodies and having tea.
Exactly.
And that's funny, that's relatable, and it proves a point and teaches a lesson.
You know, I thought about this joke the other day, and these are the kind of really strange and alienating jokes that I think of, but I might just add this to my stand-up bit that is constantly being constructed in my head. So people say that one of the tenets of good humor is that you have to be able to relate to it. And I agree. That's why rape jokes always go over really well at group therapy sessions for victims. See, I like contradicting those rules and stuff.
That's funny. If not terrible, it's still funny.
I try really hard. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah. No, it's just like I agree though. Pop culture and media and comic books, whatever you want to call it at this point, works really well as a tool, as like a gateway to getting to these deeper ideas. Because, you know, I like philosophy. I think I'm reasonably good at it. But fuck reading Kant. Jesus Christ, fuck reading Kant. Like, you don't learn anything by reading Kant. He's influenced the culture in such a, like, what's the word I want? He's wormed his way into every other thing in culture. Just find something that does his philosophy justice and just watch it or read that. And you'll get a better sense of what the hell Kant's trying to get across.
Maybe so, although we shouldn't understate the fact that actually reading the material is not negotiable. It's still helpful in a lot of regards.
I agree, but at times I think that you get a better understanding by watching or reading something from someone that understands it, as opposed to you not understanding it, trying to like force it into your brain just by reading, 500-year-old language that's like just completely alienating.
Yeah, I agree. At the same time, I feel it's just a societal bias at this point, but it's got some justification in that I would sooner take weight in a guy who argues against Kant, who's actually sat through and read his whole moral philosophy, as opposed to a guy who just watched a movie about Kant.
No, that's fair. I would recommend eventually reading it, but I don't think it's the best way to start.
Yeah, maybe not.
Like, that's what I was saying. It's a good tool. It's a good gateway to getting into the intellectual thing itself.
Yeah, that's fair. Because, I mean, believe it or not, most of what we study now just come from the media we saw as kids that influenced us.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it helps form your decision-making skills as you grow up. That being said, I'm still disappointed that cartoons lied to me as a child, and it turns out that, my school wasn't going to have a super intelligent kid who knew how to make jetpacks. Like, that one was a real letdown, Steve.
Yeah, that was a letdown. I mean, I was really let down also when I found out that the whole world really isn't 1930 outside of Batman animated series. Like, I was really hoping to go outside and see a black and white TV and a bunch of really bulky cars and radios.
If only.
If only. Yeah, definitely, if only.
In any case. No, it's just, I do think it works really well to use pop culture or comic books or whatever just as a window, because I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier, is if you can tie the ideas to the thing it not only makes the ideas more interesting right away, because you're like, oh wow, this is actually relevant to something I like, but it also elevates the thing itself by making it more intellectual as well.
And now, obviously, I guess we do run into a little bit of a danger here of people who want to write something great just because they want to be studied.
Yeah.
Essentially, what we talked about when we were talking about social commentary of when the social commentary is so much of the focus that they forget to tell the story they're trying to tell.
Who's a good example of this?
Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of anything.
Arthur Miller?
Maybe, yeah. But I feel like there's still... The Matrix. The Matrix.
Yeah,
The Matrix is a perfect example of this. Of The Matrix, whether you like it or not, and whether or not you can make academic sense out of it not, you can't debate the fact that the Wachowskis literally just took whatever sounded philosophical and interesting and threw it into a blender. That's all it is.
I'd say the first movie, no, but definitely the second and third.
Well, the first movie, to an extent, yes, also. I mean, there's so many contradictory philosophical ideas in there just because everyone needed to say something philosophical.
Yeah, but I think it worked better in the first one because it's not the main focus.
True, but it was still by the luck. Like, if you listen to the Wachowskis speak, they have no idea what any of that stuff means. Like, if you say Plato allegory of the cave, they're like, what? Well, then why is it in your movie?
Do you like the allegory of the cave? The allegory of the cave is probably the only thing of Plato's that I really enjoy.
I like the allegory of the cave, yeah. I mean, Plato is an interesting guy in that I don't agree with any of his answers, but I love him because of the questions he asked.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I guess, the case of really any philosopher that contributes to the form.
Okay, anyway, sorry, just a quick question I wanted to get out there.
Sure.
I'm not a big Plato fan myself. I kind of like Socrates when he's not Platocrates. You're welcome.
I never thought of calling him Platocrates. That's awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
Platocrates. I'm just going to use that now.
Good. Spread it around. Where was I? Oh yeah, so like I said, I think it works better when... I think it works at its best when it's not the sole focus, like we were saying, and it's used to introduce to a certain extent or to explore the material that the ideas that you're trying to get across. Like the science teacher I was talking about, you know.
Right.
What's a good way to learn about, you know, what's the word? Speed and
velocity, physics.
Yeah, velocity. There we go, velocity.
Speed with a direction.
Exactly. Because, like, you know, that's something you see the Flash do all the time in the comics is he'll catch a bullet or something. And it's like, is that actually physically possible? And it goes, turns out, yes. If he can move at the same speed as the bullet, it'd be like driving in a car at 60 miles an hour, and your other friend's driving in a car at 60 miles an hour, and you are throwing a baseball back and forth. The baseball's going 60 miles an hour, so it's not losing momentum as it's being thrown back and forth. Or it's not like, you know, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's entirely possible if the Flash were be able to move faster or at the same speed as the bullet. I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell. Like, when you make superheroes or science or whatever pop culture so ingrained in the subject you're teaching, it just sticks better.
Yeah, because you're just suddenly interested. And, like, I had a math professor who, he didn't use, like, these kinds of, like, superheroes or anything like that, but he did use kind of ridiculous examples, which, like, it was so weird. He basically made the examples jokes once you figured out the answers.
That's interesting.
And that sounds really weird, but let me explain it.
Okay.
So we had to figure out how much force it took to push a refrigerator across the room in a frictionless environment. And it was like, you know, some X number of newtons or whatever it was.
Okay.
And then then the next question was, now how much force would it take to push it up a wall? in a frictionless environment. And it was the exact same amount to push it across the room, which is like a Newton because there's no friction.
Right.
And so we're like, wait. So you just have to like use your finger and bench press your refrigerator? And my friend in the class goes, "What? You don't bench press your refrigerator every morning? Come on, man." Just lift it up the wall, you know.
I mean, I thought I was the only one who bench pressed my refrigerator.
Speaking of bench pressing things, so we're trying to move the couch into the apartment here, and like before we even started or anything, I'm like, yeah, let's just bench press it up the balcony and into the second story door, you know, as a joke. But then we're trying to move the couch in, and we're going up the stairs, and it won't go through the front door. We cannot get it through the front door. And so we actually ended up having my friend Phil bench press the couch up the balcony and into the second story door.
Oh shit!
Yeah, it was pretty fucking cool. What started out as a joke is a thing that we actually did.
That's pretty awesome.
Anyway,
well, I'm just thinking about how that would look.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Man, I knew I had a point here, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah, you were just kind of blown away by Phil's awesomeness. Now, it was a lighter couch than you'd think, but still.
Yeah, it's still pretty cool.
Exactly. Anyway, go ahead. You were something. You were trying to think of something.
I mean, I had a point. I just completely forgot what it was.
Because bench pressing couches.
I mean, just thinking about how that would look made me lose my point. Okay. Do you have anywhere else you wanted to go while I tried to figure out what I was going to say?
Sure. So bench pressing the refrigerator was what got me onto that. No, but like so he'd make the examples like entertaining in and of themselves, and I thought that was great because so often in math in particular, sciences as well, story examples are fucking stupid.
Right.
So I think involving superheroes or something like that is frankly a stroke of genius. Because like sometimes they just get so unintentionally silly. Like what's the really famous one? John has 58 candy bars. He eats 47 of them. What does John have? Diabetes. John has diabetes. It's like some of these questions, when you think about them logically, are just so fucking ridiculous. So if you just take, the real worldness out of it and just make it fun and entertaining on its own, like the guy does with superheroes, then that's awesome. That just makes it interesting in and of itself. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the last places I wanted to go with this, unless you had anything else, is at what point does pop culture become standard academia? Because no matter what high school you go to or middle school you go to, you study Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone at a certain age is expected to have read certain things, like, if not Shakespeare, then maybe, I don't know, Crime and Punishment, or I know a lot of middle schoolers are forced to read The Giver.
Great Gatsby.
Yeah. Just at what point is a pop culture work so significant and important that it's just natural academia and it somehow elevates over other media from that time?
Well, like, I remember we had to watch or read The Crucible, which is Arthur Miller.
Yeah.
And that's, like, really recent when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Like, when is The Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen going to be a part of, just you're expected to read it?
Yeah,
When is...
and I mean, there's a lot of works that, like 1984 or the James Bond books and stuff that people feel like, well, this is just standard reading material, and they don't see it as
Never
pop culture.
picked up a page of James Bond.
Huh?
I've never read a page of James Bond.
Oh, okay. Well, I took a class once, a history class, where they made us read Casino Royale when we were studying the start of the Cold War, which was interesting.
I can see that. So yeah, at what point are you just like, I guess the best way to do this, what would it be? Like, what's something that's popular now within the last 5 to 10 years that you think is going to be expected of people to have seen or read or whatever?
As much
Harry
as...
Potter?
Huh?
Are they going to start teaching Harry Potter?
At an early age, I don't see why not. Because, I mean, granted, the last couple Harry Potter books aren't that good.
I like them, but okay.
They're still really well written, and they're still great for little kids. Because the Harry Potter...
I just have, like, one plot hole or not plot hole, but, like, thing that annoys me about Harry's character.
Which is?
Like, alright, so, is Harry, like, actually kind of retarded or something? Because it's in the... It's in both the books and the movies. The movies more noticeably. So there's that whole thing where they're trapped in Malfoy's basement in the last movie, or no, second to last movie, I guess.
Deathly Hallows Part 1.
Yeah, and Dobby comes and rescues them and everything.
Yeah.
And Harry's like, Dobby, you can teleport us out of here? And Dobby just gives him, like, dude, like this look of just, dude, the fuck, what, how do you not know this? And he goes, Dobby is an elf. And it's just like, Harry, you're not, like, 11 anymore. You've been living in this world for, like, the last 12 years. How do you not know this shit, dude?
Well, I mean, that's just part of my problem with the last book in general, because it's so full of those kind of plot holes. But anyway.
Sorry.
No, that's
like,
interesting.
That's seriously like, that'd be like me going, wait a minute, you mean I have to fill my car with gas? It's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you've been going to school for this.
Well, I mean, no matter how many movies goes in, he can't fix his own damn glasses. Anyway. God, Harry, he needs to learn how to fix those things. Anyway. But yeah, Harry Potter's a thing that started coming out when I was really young, so like every year of school, another book would come out and I'd read one. And
yep, same.
It's pretty much turned out that at least the people that took an interest in Harry Potter early enough and followed it early enough are also the people that stuck with reading. And yeah. I don't see, in any time in the near future, where Harry Potter isn't important, at least in regards to getting people to read. As far as what else has been out that will probably be expected by people to read and watch or talk about, as much as I don't want to admit it, probably The Dark Knight.
Really? No, like, why don't you want to admit it?
Oh, I mean, like I said, I took that Batman class. I had to watch those movies 13 times over the course of 13 weeks and listen to people make excuses for things in the films that either didn't need excuses or didn't have excuses. Like, when you listen to people talk about how awesome The Dark Knight Returns or Dark Knight Rises is, while not even attempting to listen to very, very important criticisms, you just kind of shut down on those things. That's the fan base for those films are nearly as bad as Marvel fanboys who think the Avengers is the greatest thing on the planet.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't want to admit it just because I don't like watching those movies. But yeah, The Dark Knight's going to be something like that. The Dark Knight's been extremely influential in the paradigm of superhero movies that we got up to Avengers, and then Avengers has been influential to the paradigm of movies we're getting now.
Yeah.
So I think those are going to be kinds of movies that are going to be required. I'm sure Toy Story 3 would be up there, because it's like the greatest animated film of all time.
Oh, God, no, it's not.
Yeah, it is. It's so good.
No, they should have died, damn it.
No,
it sells out at the end. It doesn't go with what it's intending to do, and they should have fucking died.
No, they shouldn't have. It wasn't even about them dying. It was about them thinking about whether or not they would die, but...
They should have died.
Anyway.
They should have been melted down and then used to make, like, I don't know, sex toys.
Okay.
Just to fully, like, round out the fact that your dreams are dead.
Well, okay, maybe to go in that realm, Pixar is going to be important, but, like, again, what's the criteria for, like, how good does something have to be, or how important does something have to be before it's just automatic academia?
See, I don't know, because, like, it's not like someone makes something for popular consumption and goes, and now this shall also be academia. It's like, it has to have an unintended impact on the culture to a certain extent.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, the person can make the thing, like Arthur Miller with The Crucible was clearly trying to make a political point and all this stuff.
Right.
It's, you know, it's a little on the nose for me, but whatever. He's clearly trying to do that, but I don't think he, like, intended for the play to be the go-to example for McCarthyism, you know?
Right.
I think he intended it to be a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge, fuck you guys. But not like, this is what McCarthyism was really like. I didn't think that's what he thought people would be saying about it. So, I don't know, there has to be an unintentional side to it. So it has to be something that's around now, within the last 5 to 10 years, that is unintentionally causing waves. So, like a music video about a guy getting lit on fire, starting up the Arab Spring?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird cutoff thing of how far removed does it have to be from its unintended consequences before it's justifiable. Because, like, books like The Giver and The Crucible and Brave New World and stuff, they're not that old.
Yeah.
But then we have things like Shakespeare, and we have Euthyphro, and we have Plato in general, which are centuries old, thousands of years old. So, at what point did history stop being impacted?
Well, that's the thing, is it's never stopped.
Right, but like, at what point are you justified in saying that the consequences of this are now fully understood? And that's why we ought to stop and look into it. Because there's like a 50-year gap for The Crucible from when it was studied from when it was released to when it was studied, but Joss Whedon, you can get a degree in Buffy studies, and that show just ended maybe 10 years ago.
I don't know. Like, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Not Prime Minister, but like, China's equivalent of Secretary of State, I think. Was once asked, like, because they knew that he was a history buff, so someone asked him, what do you think the long-term effects of the French Revolution have been? And he goes, it's still too soon to tell. And that was in, like, 1970-something.
Right.
It's one of those, like, great history quotes. It's like, it's really true. It's just, when does history stop?
Right.
There's this guy, after the Cold War ended, he wrote a book called The End of History, because he claimed that once the communist Soviet Union had collapsed, then that was it. The great struggle between ideas had finally ended. And then, you know, fucking Bosnia happened, and he got quiet really quick.
Well, I guess if you want to talk about the history, look no further than Marx and his whole, the moment you stomp out capitalism and both the top and the bottom people are happy, then history is over.
sure. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, that was his whole outlook, and that was the whole outlook of Lenin, that was the whole outlook of Mao Zedong. It's a very strange thing to say that history will stop at a certain point, but at the same time, when we're talking about this is when we study it, because I had read a history paper at one point, and one of the requirements is that you can't pick anything after 1991 because it's too soon. But why is that the cutoff? Why not 1990? Why not 1989? Why not 1988? Like, at what point is something able to be studied? And for that matter, if we already understand the impacts and consequences of it, like, say, Watchmen, why aren't we studying that regularly?
See, I think, like, it requires basically a generation. Not like a full generation dying out, but, like, you know, you need the people that were around at the time to have kids of their own, before you can study something historically, I guess.
Yeah, perhaps.
Because I feel like that you need the generation that is experiencing it to be able to reflect on it. Because otherwise you're just essentially gathering newspapers. And certainly you do that historically. When you're doing something with history, you gather newspapers and you do interviews and stuff to see what the common themes, and you create the narrative out of the little bits of the time. But you need the people that were there to have time to reflect on it.
Right.
Like, you ask me, Ian, what are your opinions on what's going on in Ukraine? I have opinions on what's going on in Ukraine. They mostly revolve around Vladimir Putin being fucking crazy.
As all opinions should.
Yeah, but that's not a very, you know, distanced, like, well thought out thing for me yet. Now, you back it up a little bit and go, Ian, what are your opinions on, you know, the September 11th attack? I can have a little bit more refined, but still, we're still dealing with things that are fallout from the fallout of that.
Right.
So, you know, it still needs a little more time. It's still too close. So, like, for something to be proper pop culture academic critique, I think it needs to come from that era, and that the people that it was made for at that time need to have moved past it to a certain extent. You need that breathing room.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from with that. Because obviously, like, right now, if someone asked me, like, what do you think about the fact that Scotland voted no to independence in the referendum? Well, I mean, it just happened, and sure, you can talk about economic consequences or the history that led up to it, but you can't know anything, at least until a certain number of years pass, and it means something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that whole thing is just sort of an abstract concept. I don't know. Let's say that both of us are 50 years older than we are, and we have the choice of, this is the thing that we want everyone in schools to at least once look into. What would you pick? Pop culture-wise, what's the one thing that's so important to the fiber of your being that came out while we were alive that you think in 50 years should be remembered?
Ian and Bobby's epic quest to run a movie. Every episode of Geeky Gentlemen. Sorry. Had to. Dark Knight is definitely up there. But honestly, it'd probably be something a little smaller than that. You know, you'd have to watch some of The Daily Show or The Colbert Report is what I'd say.
I agree, yeah. That's definitely up there for me. I mean, it's a really abstract question. The only reason I ask is because when we go back and look through history, it's so much better to just watch a movie from that time period than it is to crack open a textbook. Not because reading the textbook's bad, but because you get an idea of what the subconscious thoughts of people were at that time. Like, the 60s are always more interesting to me because of James Bond and because of Alfred Hitchcock and because of Gregory Peck than they will ever be because of a Brinkley textbook and quizzes.
I just think textbooks are like the worst thing ever.
They are. I hate them.
Like it just takes the... Like, textbooks are vampires. They just take the life out of everything that you're reading about. Anyway.
Well, I'm glad you say vampire, because I think if I'm going to pick something that everyone should watch in, like, 50 years, I'm going to go with Angel. I think it's the best show in television.
I've never heard anyone say that before, but it's the first time that anyone's ever said anything that makes me want to watch it. That being said, there's a big chance that I won't enjoy it now, so thanks, Steve.
I mean, that show had such a profound impact on me at such an early age, and I've seen it so many times. I feel like if everyone was at least exposed to it once, at the right age, then their life might be completely different. Because
I think you're kind of overselling it. But
maybe I am. No, I totally am. I'm speaking in hyperbole. But at the same time, there's ideas there, and there's so much raw emotion that you get invested in that when you eventually get to the conclusion, when you finally get that moment of sanity in the madness, it means that much more.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think it's got to be something with a comedic edge to it. Because, I mean, you look at things like Modern Times or God, what else?
The Onion?
No, I'm talking about just, like, older stuff that's, like, really relevant today.
Oh, okay.
Or Dr. Strangelove. You look at stuff like Modern Times or Dr. Strangelove, I feel like the comedic things help demonstrate what the problems of and the thinking of the time were. So I think something like The Daily Show or something like
South Park even.
Yeah, something like South Park, something that parodies or satires what's going on in the world, helps you understand it better.
Yeah, because the best media does do that. I guess we went from a very specific, broad, and yet narrow topic to an even more abstract one.
It is a strange thing, and there's no right way to attack this beast.
No, there isn't.
But yeah, I think we got to an interesting place. Do you have any final thoughts you want to get out on this?
Well, I'm not sure how many times, if ever, you do like revisitations on topics, but I feel like more than anything, in a couple of years, if we went back to this, it might be interesting to analyze what we think is important academically in pop culture.
Yeah.
Just because time seems to fly so much faster now than it ever used to.
Yeah, I agree. Now we do part twos on topics sometimes, but you need that breathing room so you're not just repeating yourself.
No, I agree, but I'm like, I don't know, go like 3 years from now when we get the Justice League movie. And what are our thoughts on politics and the referendum and Ukraine and stuff then? Would Winter Soldier still be my favorite superhero movie, Like
when there is no Ukraine.
When there is no Ukraine. When Northern Ireland riots.
So do you know who Nate from Deadpool and Friends is?
Yeah, I used to talk to the guy.
Okay. So, like, he's a nice guy and everything, but he sent out a tweet the other day that, like, kind of pissed me off, because it kind of showed, like, American ignorance, I feel.
Right.
It was like, so why can people in Scotland vote for independence, but people in Crimea and eastern Ukraine can't? And I just wanted to reply, well, see, there are no tanks or guys with baseball bats in Scotland. But I decided not to because I wanted to be nice. In any case.
Well, people on social media seem to think that there are experts in political policy. just because.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'm before we close this, I do have one rant, because I do so very, very rarely ever just go completely off topic and yell about something.
Go for it.
Okay, well, I want to. Because I hate social media and politics mixing, there are constant memes about how we should get rid of government aid, like food stamps and such, and I say, okay, fine, that's cool. But that also comes from college students. And I say, well, okay, you want to get rid of food stamps. Let's say we don't. What would you do to fix them? And they'd say something like, well, make it so they can't buy alcohol or they can't buy junk food. And I'm like, okay, now look at your college tuition bill and recognize that that is not the full amount. You get government aid discounting your college bill. And if you're going to say that we should stop food stamps or restrict what people can buy on food stamps, then you should also be prepared to be restricted on what you can buy when you're in college, or just completely lose the aid and pay full price tuition all the time. Because that in-state $8,000 bill or that out-of-state $30,000 bill is only a fraction of how much it really costs that the government subsidizes you to go to school. And I wish people thought about that.
No, they don't. That's the thing.
Yeah. But that pisses me off when people don't realize that, and they're in college.
Yeah. No, they worked hard for everything they had. They did it all by themselves.
Yeah.
Onion had this great bit where man pulls himself up by his bootstraps to go from high-level accounting position that his father put him in to head of his father's company. Doesn't understand why people need handouts.
That's exactly what it is. That's fantastic.
Yeah, gotta love the Onion. Anyway, for me, I think, like I said, I think that pop culture is, just on the whole, media, whatever you want to call it, is a really useful tool in academia for, like, I keep coming back to this, for introducing the ideas of a topic, for making the ideas of a topic more accessible, and for making the thing that you're introducing it with elevated to a more intellectual area so it can get some respect that it probably deserves if it can be talked about on that level. So that's one thing that's really good. And I think that it's something that I'm glad is being used more and more as time goes on. So yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sorry, go ahead.
Snobs need to get the fuck out and stop assuming that just because people like Doctor Who and have, like, you know, fangirl screams about it doesn't mean that it's not good.
Yeah. I mean, if you get into astrophysics or time travel or science because you watched Doctor Who as a kid, more power to you. And if
that's what happened with Stephen Hawking in Star Trek.
Well, yeah, there you go. I mean, part of the reason I major in philosophy and political science and economics and all that stuff is because I read a whole bunch of comic books as a kid. And I still do. And that's how I relate those concepts and how I understand them. If I can't figure out what Plato's trying to say, I try to put it in terms of Batman. And it works.
The allegory of the cave in Batman is a significantly different allegory.
It is, but I mean, then we can go to The Matrix, despite how much that movie isn't very philosophical.
Okay. Anyway. Alright, so that was fun, though. This is a good topic.
Yeah,
good topic.
We certainly went longer than I thought we were going to.
Yeah, me too. Anyway, so next week. I've been kind of going back and forth. What's the date next week, so I make sure I'm not violating the rule that I told you?
Oh, okay. Next week is the 26th.
Yeah, okay, so we're good.
Yes.
Alright, so next week we're doing a review topic, and I might as well make this announcement first. During the month of October, we will be doing only reviews of horror movies, so that'll be fun, everybody.
Yeah.
But next week is a review topic, but it's not a horror review topic. Next week, this one's been kind of on my mind for a while, and we might have a guest depending if he can make it. I tried asking tonight, but it doesn't look like he's online, even though he's online. If Dan Torrey's able to make it, that'll be fun, because he's only been on the show one time before. But anyway, next week, come rain or shine, we will be discussing the film across the universe.
Oh, that's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I thought that'd be fun. In any case, everyone, thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the Politician.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing